is John David Marley, who has a Ph.D. in history from George Washington University. He taught in the history department at Cal State Fullerton, and Marley was the creator of the first class to specifically focus on the history of Disneyland. He is a member of the Hyperion Historical Alliance, a group of scholars who work with the Walt Disney Company. His last book, Skipper Stories, True Tales from Disney, the other one? This one? True Tales from Disneyland's Jungle Cruise, is the first oral history of a Disneyland attraction. He has appeared on the History Channel, published articles in scholarly journals, a chapter for an anthology on civil rights movement in historical memory, and over a dozen book reviews and editorials for the History News Network. A former Jungle Cruise skipper, and I know we all wanted to be skippers when we were, we all did, and we all wanted to shoot the gun. So he was a skipper at Disneyland, and he is the creator and producer of the popular Jungle Cruise based stand-up comedy show, The Skipper Show, and the owner of a Disneyland-based Etsy store. Please welcome David John Marley.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Janice. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thanks for coming out today. Thanks for parking at Cal State Fullerton, I should say. I got my master's degree here, and I taught here for years, and then I came back and taught for about 5 years. I'm not teaching at Fullerton this year, and so I haven't worn a suit in months. And so I was ironing. I'm wearing a suit. I haven't worn like a tie in so long. My wife's like, "What are you doing? You're talking about Disneyland. Put your Hawaiian shirt on and stop." And I'm like, "But a tie. I get to wear a tie." She's like, "Just put your..." So I'm wearing a Hawaiian shirt. So if you don't like it, you can take it up with her. So and thank you for being here. It's fun to be back on the campus and be talking to people who I don't have to grade. So that's very exciting. That's the best part. I had someone from OLLI, it wasn't Janice, somebody from OLLI came into one of my classes once before I was invited to come do this. I was teaching in a class and a lady came in and sat down and I'm like, "Can I help you?" And she went, "No, is it you?" And so she sat there for a while and I'm lecturing and I'm kind of looking, and then after about 20 minutes she got up and walked out the door, and my students were like, "Who was that?" I'm like, "I don't know, but I'm pretty sure I just got fired for whatever I said." And then I got invited to come here, so I'm excited to finally get to be here. I want to start out by we'll talk about Disneyland and the Jungle Cruise and whatnot, but I want to make it very clear before I start that this whole thing, if you heard anything about my autobiography, I do a lot of Jungle Cruise stuff. I write books about the Jungle Cruise. I have a store where I sell art that looks like the Jungle Cruise. I write books about the Jungle Cruise. Clearly, I'm a man of very narrow focuses in life, and for the very first time, I get to publicly thank/blame the person who was at fault for it. My sister is here today, Linda Fern. Give her a big round of applause. We grew up far away in the city of Orange. I don't know if you know how far away that is. So far away from here. And she was 16, just got her driver's license, and I was about 8, right? Because I'm 8 years younger than you. And she decided to take me to Disneyland. Why would you take your little brother to Disneyland? That's a pretty nice sister thing to do anyway. But I have virtually no memory at all of that whole day, except for we were in line at the Jungle Cruise, and the boat came, and we didn't get on it. The boat left, and we were waiting for the next boat to pull up. And I was talking to the skipper, who seemed to be super tall, and he's like, "Oh, where are you from?" I said, "Orange." He went, "Oh, well, why are you here today?" And I went, "My sister took me." And he said, "Why'd your sister bring you?" And I said, "I don't know." And I just remember the skipper looked at my sister, and then he got down on one knee and leaned over to me, and he said, "Be careful, she's going to ask you for something." And at that, I was 7 years old. I remember this part so clearly. At that moment, I thought, when I grow up, this is what I'm going to do for a living. I'm going to be a Jungle Cruise skipper. And then I got the job and thought, I should have had higher goals for my life. But I got to do it a couple times. When I was a grad student here in the history department, I knew I was going to leave Orange County to go to grad school. I went to grad school in Washington, D.C., so I thought I'm going to be a skipper. So I got a job there for about 6 months in the mid-90s. So that was my last job in California. And my first job when I moved back 5 years later was right back at Disneyland. So it's how I got the nickname Dr. Skipper. I got that at the Jungle Cruise because I was a professor who also happened to work at Disneyland, like you do. Makes sense. I got to meet one of the executives. He's like, "You're the most educated person who works at the park." And I went, "Don't tell me that. That's depressing." But I loved it. I would teach classes here and then go drive Jungle Cruise boats, and it's just taken over my life. And since I'm not teaching this year, I've just been working on my new books that I'm working on and my art, and I'm loving it. Again, not having to grade is just... Some of you teachers, I could tell, because some of you just went, "Oh, that's nice," and I could tell some of you who've been teachers were like, "Yes." It's very nice. So let's talk about the Jungle Cruise and the Disneyland and its birth and how that gave birth to the Jungle Cruise. First, tell you a little bit more about who I am. I already gave away the nickname. There I am driving a Jungle Cruise boat. That's when I was a professor here at Cal State Fullerton. That picture right there is from 2004. I had to quit when my daughter was born because I figured I had a full-time teaching job and I had the Disneyland job and then I had a baby. I had to give up one of them. I didn't give up the baby. I really wanted the baby. I should have given up the teaching job at the other school and stayed at Disneyland. But there I'm driving the boat. When I was there in 2002 and 2003, we won the Mousker. Get it? It's like an Oscar, but a mouse, so it's a mouse. They think they're so clever. Mouskers for Best Attraction of the Year. I'm not saying I'm the reason why we won it, but I'm not saying I'm not the reason why we won it. All right. And then this is my claim to fame. I have two children. I have 2 daughters, but I have a third child, and my third child is this barrel right here. And I'm abnormally proud of this barrel. If you ever go to Florida, to Walt Disney World, they have a brand new restaurant called the Skipper Canteen, and it's based on the Jungle Cruise. It's right across from the Jungle Cruise. And a friend of mine helped design the restaurant. And before it opened, he was sending me pictures. He's like, "Okay, don't show this to anybody. It's not public yet, but here's some photos of the restaurant I designed." I'm like, "Cool." And he sent me a picture of this big, like the main dining area. And he said, "See that barrel in the back?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he took a close-up of it, and my name's on it. It says Professor Marley, delivered to Professor Marley. He said, "I put your name on a barrel." And so that's me. It's bolted to the ground, which is why it's still in Florida and not here with us today. And the best part about it, 2 cool things about it, is it says Marshall College on it. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. And my friend goes, "You don't know Marshall College?" I'm like, "No." He goes, "That's where Indiana Jones teaches." And I'm like, yes, I teach with Indy. So I could use a whip and punch Nazis, do the whole thing. It's pretty awesome. And so when I was there getting that picture taken, people would walk by, and I only get called Dr. Marley one place on earth, and it's here on this campus. And if I'm not on this campus, no one calls me Dr. Marley. And so I was there getting my picture taken, and this waiter walks by, "Oh, hi, Dr. Marley." And I jumped, and I'm like, No, he did. And so I went to pay the bill, and I gave him my card. They're like, "Oh, Marley, like the barrel." And for once in my life, I decided I'm not going to brag. And my buddy goes, "It is him. That is him." So I got my picture taken with the barrel, so I was very excited to be there. That's my third child. I don't got to pay to send it to college, so it might be my favorite child. So, I'm going to talk about things. I thought I'd show you this photo. I love this photo. It's Walt. They asked Walt Disney, "Hey, point at your favorite point of Disneyland," and so he did. There's the Jungle Cruise. That's his favorite part of Jungle. No Jungle Cruise. All right, just me. All right. I just like that photo. I showed that at a Disney conference where they were talking about how great the other parts of the park are. I'm like, then why is Walt pointing to Jungle Cruise as his favorite? And they're going, "How do you know that's what they asked him to point at?" I'm like, "That's because I'm assuming that's what they asked him to point at." All right, so I thought I'd talk a little bit about the Jungle Cruise and how it was going to be designed and be a little bit different than a lot of us, if you've been on it, it was going to be a lot different than how it is today. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So if you have questions, be sure to hit me up with them and whatnot at the end. So we'll talk about this is the very first map of Disneyland ever drawn. I have some cool close-ups of it in a second. Well, this is the very first map drawn by a guy named Herb Ryman. The map is huge. It was drawn by Ryman and Walt Disney in a 48-hour time span. They were trying to get people to give, I almost said donate, to invest in Disneyland, and a bunch of companies weren't interested. And so Walt decided, we need a visual aid, we need a map. So we called this artist, hey, come to the studio, help me draw this map. And he and Walt, they stayed up for almost 48 hours straight and drew this thing. And it's huge, and colored it in. And when they were done, Walt rolled it up and had it sent by overnight flight to New York City so his brother could meet with the bankers to raise the whopping $15 million that they needed. That's how much Bob Iger makes in a day. But $15 million. To do this. Now, if you look at the map, some of the stuff you can kind of see. This was the main entrance. That was going to be Main Street right there. Is my pointer? You can see it. There's the hub. There's where the castle was going to be. There's Tomorrowland, like it is. But what you may not recognize is over to the right, that's where Adventureland was going to be. It was going to be on the opposite side of the park. You can see it here in this close-up. There's the hub, the center of the park. Here's Tomorrowland, and this was going to be Adventureland. A completely opposite side from where it is, which, have any of you ever worked at the park? Has anyone ever worked at Disneyland? All right. When I worked there, and still today my students tell me, it's an interesting thing about humans. Humans, we like to break apart into different groups, and at Disneyland there was a divide between the East Siders and the West Siders. Which side of the park? And a friend of mine goes, people who work on the east side, that's like Fantasyland and Tomorrowland. He's like, they're all about working and being efficient and rides that work on time and tucking their shirt in. And the west side is all about, leaning on things and having a good time because we've got pirates and Tom Sawyer's Island. And so there's a reputation that the east side people, a little more uptight, west side, we're more fun on the west side, I'll be honest. I'm a little biased. I worked there for 3.5 years. I only worked at the Jungle Cruise and the Enchanted Tiki Room. Those were the two places I would work. I flat out refused to work anywhere else. They offered me other spots. I'm like, no, I work here for fun. I have a real job where I teach and grade and do other things. When I go here, it's for my joy, and I don't want to measure kids and say you're too short to go on the ride, you're too whatever. I just want to crack jokes and shoot guns at hippos and try to get it all out of my system. But anyway, so originally, Adventureland was going to be on this far side. There was going to be a gazebo right there at the front, like a Victorian gazebo that was going to sell exotic plants from around the world, because that's, go to Disneyland, buy exotic plants. And but it was going to be there. There was going to be live animals all through the jungle. It was going to be that one big loop right there. That was the original design. And even in a later map, a more formal map of Disneyland, it's still there. There's the Jungle Cruise right there. Here's the entrance. There's Main Street. This was going to be called Holiday Land, a land they briefly had outside the park grounds. But it was still located right there. Even when they began construction, that's where Adventureland was going to be. Until they did this. Hey, look, that's what Anaheim looks like today. It doesn't. I don't know if you guys have been to Anaheim lately. Okay, good. But there's the 5 freeway they're building right there. There's the city of Anaheim, and this is the property line that will become Disneyland. And they took a photo just like this, and they had a transparency of this construction, and they laid it over the actual photograph. And the Morgan brothers, who were in charge of doing the landscaping for the park, realized there's these big long rows of eucalyptus trees. We could use all of those and save you money. And Walt went, save money. And so they decided, instead of having the Jungle Cruise here, let's move it over here. We can use all these trees. Why not? Just keep the eucalyptus trees there. We'll save them. So they realized, all right, we'll use all these trees for Jungle Cruise. We'll just have those big, as you know, right, the eucalyptus trees they use as windbreaks, right, in the farms when we have the Santa Ana winds. So there's the land when it's being dug up. You can see that's the line of eucalyptus trees right there. They kept a lot of them. And those eucalyptus trees are still there at the park today. And I found out from a friend of mine that works in their horticulture department, they collect the seedlings, and when it grows little trees, they keep them and grow them. So when they have to replace some of the eucalyptus trees, they're replaced with the same trees, right? Like the children of the original trees, I guess. The other thing they did was this wasn't just an orange grove, it was orange groves and walnut trees. So they took a lot of them and they just replanted the orange groves around the Jungle Cruise. They just mounted a bunch of the dirt up and they said, well, we're going to spend a lot of money on plants, but we're going to run out, so let's just stick orange trees in the back as background. And so they had gardeners go trim off the orange blossoms so that they wouldn't be growing oranges out in the middle of the Amazon jungle, right? Kind of ruins the effect. So they thought, all right, we'll do that, and we'll also take some of them and plant them upside down. So you have the cool roots sticking up. So it has a cool kind of jungly, spooky kind of vibe going forward. I'll show you some better pictures of that in just a moment. But you can see some of the early construction going on right there. I love this photograph because it shows you all of Disneyland and literally the entire city of Anaheim. That's it. If you drive around, you might know this, if you drive around downtown Anaheim, it's got a South Street and a North Street and East and West because it was formed by Germans, and Germans, very orderly. All right, good. So it was nice and square, and this is the city of Anaheim. So that was the whole city. You can see you can see the freeways coming along, and then suddenly here it's just dirt. So like the 5 hadn't been done yet. There's mighty Harbor Boulevard. Fullerton, where are we? We're way up here, but I'll show you. I'll show you this. I added this one in just for you guys. Mighty Cal State Fullerton in 1960, and look, there's still no place to park. Same exact problem. I do like this. This is where the 57 is, right here, where it was going to go. But I show this to my students, but it's got the library, McCarthy Hall, Langsdorff Hall, McCarthy Hall, the theater. That's the only parking lot. My mentor professor when I was a student here is still with us, a man named Lawrence DeGraff. He was the first history professor hired at Cal State Fullerton when it opened in 1957. And he just retired a few years ago, but still helps out. I took my oral history classes from him, which is how to interview, and that's what my books are, oral history books. So I should take him out to lunch. I owe him a lot. Anyway, but I thought you might like to see that to show you that this was 5 years after Disneyland was built, how wildly built up Fullerton was, and Brea off in the distance. All right, let's get back to our topic. So, Jungle Cruise. They started building Jungle Cruise first, I would say because it's the best. The real reason is because they needed the longest amount of time for all the plants to grow. The other things, you could just put up a big building and it's done. But they started on this first because they wanted a whole season for the plants to grow and get in there and be strong. And the winter of 54 and 55 was an unusually wet one, which slowed down construction, but it helped out the Jungle Cruise guys. You can see the eucalyptus trees are there. Almost all these other trees are orange trees or walnut trees that they've stuck in there to kind of spruce it up. And you can see they haven't even done any of the construction on Main Street. They're building the berm where the train is going to go, but they're working on it. And there's Disneyland on opening day. Oh, opening day. I know, right? All right. So there's the entrance. You can still see the Jungle Cruise. You can see into the river from up above. It hasn't closed over yet. It was still kind of wide open. There wasn't a whole lot left. Even though I found out for an average building, if they're doing a construction site, they'll spend about 2% of the budget on landscaping. That's considered a normal percentage to spend, 2 to 3%. At Disneyland, they spent 7% of their budget on landscaping. When I first heard the 7%, I'm like, 7%, that's not a lot, until I found out 2% is normal. So that's a lot more than 2. I'm not good at math, but I can tell that 2% is more than, right? I saw the list of all the talks that you've been doing here, right? With the math and the science and the more like, oh God, it's all like, be smart, be smart, be smart. Here's stories about Disneyland. Be smart, be smart. So, taking an academic break today so you can kind of relax, and there will be no math today. That's as 7%, 2%. That's as mathematical as we're getting. We're moving on. But I like to show this photo because it shows you how still wide open the jungle was. It was considered the big attraction at the park. It takes over 3 acres of land, so it's by far the largest part of the park. Matter of fact, if you notice, when you go to Disneyland, you're right by where the hippos are at the end. I mean, the part This is the length of Main Street. As you walk up Main Street, you're walking up the length of the Jungle Cruise. It's that big of an attraction. It takes up a whole lot of land. So there that is. This is an official photo, and I want to show you, because it shows you how undone Disneyland was. This is one of their official photos. It's just, there's still dirt everywhere. And they're like, look at Disneyland, a magical place of gardens, and at least 3 little bushes. And an ancient fire hydrant, a magical, unhidden fire hydrant. So I thought they really spent a lot of money on the gardens, but there still wasn't. One of the things the Evans brothers got to do is they knew where the freeways were being built. And so they went and took the trees out of the construction path. And they told people, all right, we'll pay you $5 for each tree. And there's a bunch from, what's the name of the park right by downtown LA? The city, downtown LA. Pershing Square. Whoever said that, thank you very much. They were going to rehab Pershing Square and were pulling out a bunch of trees. And the Evans brothers said, we'll pay $50 per tree. And they stuck them on trucks because they were huge. And so Disneyland had some big, old trees from day one because they were from Pershing Square and from wherever the freeways were going to be going, which I thought was pretty clever. But that's still, yeah. Not a whole lot of stuff there. So where did Jungle Cruise, where did it come from? Where did this concept come from? And the way it developed and like the movies it got its ideas from is stuff I find fascinating. Hopefully you will too, because there will be an exam at the end. There will not. Walt Disney, he started doing nature films. Now they're called Disney Earth is the name of them. That's what they call that whole series of nature films. They used to be called true life adventure movies. Anyone ever see a true life adventure film? Right in the cinema, right? The very first one ever done was called Seal Island. And Walt thought people would like to see nature films. And he had a crew that had done this filming. And it won an Academy Award in 1948 for Best Documentary Subject, Seal Island. And that got Walt to realize there's a real desire for this, and people want to see these animals, and that's something we should maybe do in a park. And so before Disneyland opened, there were 8 different true life adventure films that came out. That's why the original name of Adventureland was True Life Adventureland. They actually made a marquee for it and everything. It was going to be, so people today are like, Disney names everything after a movie. Yeah, that's the way they did it in the 50s as well. That's why the castle at Disneyland is called Sleeping Beauty's Castle. The park opened in 55, Sleeping Beauty opened in 57. So he's always been marketing stuff. It's a ploy. Anyway, that and to sell very expensive churros. It's a ploy. So Seal Island was the first one of these nature documentaries that people really liked. And he thought the whole goal of Adventureland was you'll be able to see the real scenes from the movies live and in action. And that means real animals is what Walt wanted to have there. It didn't work out that way. They had to convince him we don't want real animals at the park. But for years, Walt's like, no, real animals. There's going to be lions and elephants and giraffes, and it'll look seals, and there'll be swans in the river, and it'll be just like the movies. And the man that helped design it, the guy that did more than anything else, is this gentleman right here named Harper Goff. There's Harper Goff, there's Walt. And for years, nobody knew who this guy was. And I showed it to a buddy of mine. I have a couple friends that are Imagineers, work up in Glendale, help design the rides and whatnot, and said they're not sure, but Imagineering thinks that might be Ripley from Ripley's Believe It or Not. That he was given a tour, and he goes, from the photos, we haven't narrowed down. We're pretty sure that's who that is. That Walt was giving him a tour of the park. You know, it's not even open yet. The canopy isn't even on the boat yet. But they're giving him a tour. But Harper Goff was a set designer. He'd worked at Warner Brothers for 10 years before he ran into Walt in London and got a job working for Walt Disney Studios. But it was his designs that really are the Jungle Cruise. You might recognize some, he drew the map of the Jungle Cruise. Before 1994, see the little red section? That's the original outline of the park. They took that out in the mid-90s to make room for the Indiana Jones attraction. They pushed the jungle back a bit to give Adventureland more room. Where's my little clicker? And then, there it is. And then they cut out that part of the little C-curve thing to make room for the queue for people to walk through. But he designed this whole thing. Harper Goff designed it. The best part about it, now when I see plans for Disneyland rides, they have blueprints and it takes years and you got to get it approved by this committee and everybody. He just had a sandbox and a stick. And that's how he made it. That's how he built it. He had a sandbox built and he's like, do it like this. And when some of the construction workers were having trouble figuring out how to do it, he took one of his own cars and he built a wood frame around it the size of a boat. All right, this is roughly the size of the boat around my car, and he just drove around it. And he had a buddy sitting in the passenger seat, he was in the driver's seat, and they had a bunch of wooden stakes, and they'd stop every few feet, and they'd stick a stake in the ground. And he drove this path in his car in the middle of an orange field in Anaheim and said, everything between these two things, scoop the dirt out and dump it on either side. And you'll magically have islands and a river. That's how complicated it was. And one of my friends said the greatest thing about Disneyland, or about Jungle Cruise, every other ride is super high tech, and even Pirates of the Caribbean has some very advanced animatronics and sound effects. And Jungle Cruise was built with a stick. And even today, the best tool we have to fix a problem at the ride is a stick. Like literally, something breaks down, we would hop on a boat and we would take a stick with us. And whatever the problem is, odds are the stick's gonna fix it. There's little sensors that your boat crosses and it triggers the next scene. A lot of times something blocks it, so you just use the stick to move the bamboo or whatever's in the way. A stick. It's as low tech as you can get. So other rides would break down, or like the power would go out across the park. Oh no, what are we gonna do? Jungle Cruise is like, we're about to get busy. We just keep driving. Like, we don't, the animals may not move. That means we would drive faster so you couldn't tell. It's true. One time the natives that dance around, they weren't dancing. So we're like, what do we do? The manager goes, just drive by faster. Just don't slow down. Like, there's the natives, and just keep going. No one will know. And no one knew. So there's the plan, done with a stick. So low tech, I absolutely love it. But here's some of the work that Harper Goff did do before. He did the set for Casablanca, a film you hopefully have seen, if not. All right, but that's some of his set design work when he was at Warner Brothers. And you'll see that's Casablanca. This is something he drew for his vision of what Adventureland should look like. And it looks rather similar, right? It's only, 13 years after Casablanca that he was asked to design this. So it's not really as tiki and South Pacific-y as you might think. He mixed in a lot of different cultures together because you were adventuring all around the world, not just one specific area where they all dress in shirts like the one I'm wearing. So there's another one of his drawings at the top of what he wanted the Jungle Cruise building to look like. And then here it is in 1955 when it was designed. Some of you may know the story of this palm tree right here. It's called the Dominguez palm. And named after the Dominguez family that planted it there in 1890. And when they sold the land to Disney, one of the conditions was that palm tree has to stay there. And when they were building it, they realized, well, that's going to be in the middle of the parking lot. Actually, it would be right where Pirates of the Caribbean is now. So they said, well, we got to move it. Let's stick it in the front of Adventureland. And it's still there, still growing from the 1890s. And it's still there at Disneyland. It's really, I think that's quite cool. So the look was very similar. Originally, see that little tower at the top? That was designed for the manager to stay up there so he could see the whole jungle. And it only worked for about 2 years, because I don't know if you know this, plants grow. Did you guys know that plants? Oh, you guys are smarter than Disneyland managers. Look at that. You knew the secret of plant life. So they grew up and then they couldn't see the boats anymore. So they realized, well, that's not. So they eventually tore it down and put up a different structure. But somebody who didn't know anything about plants decided, well, that thought. But the look is pretty similar, right, to what they had designed. There was also one of Harper Goff's favorite movies was The African Queen. You've all seen The African Queen, right? I've made my girls watch The African Queen more times than they're comfortable with. But that movie, really, Harper Goff loved that movie, the 1951 movie African Queen. And he wanted to base the whole look of the Jungle Cruise on that film with Catherine Humphrey Bogart. So you can see the look of the boat on the next screen. Here's that's a model of the African Queen from the movie. And here's Harper Goff's vision of what a Jungle Cruise boat should look like. Fairly similar, right? It's larger to hold more people, but you're still driving it from the middle just like Humphrey Bogart did. And this is another drawing that Harper Goff did of the backside of water. Still has that kind of look to it. There's Walt saying, this will be for the best ride. I like saying that when I have people that currently work at the park at other places than Jungle Cruise, because they just do this. I think you're so funny. Think you're so funny. Yeah, we do think we're so funny. Anyway, Walt liked us best. Anyway, so that's really the look he wanted, but Walt said we're not going to have things looking beat up and run down at Disneyland. So if you remember, before 1994, all the boats at Disneyland, at Jungle Cruise, were nice and bright and shiny and white and had the nice white striped canopies on them. It wasn't until the mid-90s when they brought in the Indiana Jones ride where they aged the boats and they aged the building to make it look like it was old and beat up and jungly to kind of make it fit that theme. So before that, it was all nice and white and happy and shiny. So it took, almost 50 years after Harper Goff came up with the idea to have this rustic-looking boat that they finally got it. I don't know if you know this, they're making a Jungle Cruise movie that's coming out next summer with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. It's coming out next July. I know that because I'm writing a history of the Jungle Cruise, and they want it before the movie comes out, which means I have work to do that you may have correctly guessed I have not been doing. So I have... You're figuring me out pretty quick. All right, good for you. You're a good crowd. I thought this is pretty interesting. So there's Humphrey Bogart in the original African Queen. There's The Rock. We look like twins, don't we? And then they really went for the look of the African Queen in a lot of ways, don't you think? I think it's similar. And I thought, that's awesome. I thought, that smile, that's the smile you make when you know you're about to make Johnny Depp money. He knows. This movie goes well, there's going to be sequels, and he'll just have to move money to get through his house. He'll be like, why are these bags of cash? So that's coming out, next summer. One other movie that heavily influenced the look of the Jungle Cruise is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. See, my voice just cracked. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, you remember that movie? I was watching it with my girls, and I'm like, because I was just showing them old Disney movies. I don't know why, but I was like, you're watching these old movies. And I realized this is really Jungle Cruise stuff. And so these are screenshots I took with my camera. But this, look who the production designer was, Harper Goff, the guy that designed the Jungle Cruise. He worked on this the year before he was given the job to work on the Jungle Cruise. He went from this movie directly to the Jungle Cruise. And one other interesting thing, one of the most, you ever read a book and you're reading a book and you realize the author of this book is just a genius, and you're getting inside that person's brain. A man named John Hench was considered the first Imagineer, and Walt called him his Renaissance man. That's a different guy. But John Hench was the first Imagineer, and just brilliant. I read his, not his autobiography, but a story about how he picks different colors and how you do different themes and how to make something, if you want people to feel like something scary, you use these colors and these wallpapers and these sound effects. And it's just an amazing book on how to design things like Disney does by John Hench, but that's off topic. But Harper Goff was the production designer of this movie, and he used a lot of the stuff from the movie into the Jungle Cruise. I have a few shots I'll show you as an example. One, there were the natives. There's the natives in the movie. I thought, why are there natives in a submarine movie? I'm the only one? All right, because someone said, oh yeah, there's the scene with the natives. I go, wait, like island natives in a submarine? Do they not know how submarines, anyway, under the water, people tend to live above it. Anyway, but this is a scene, and then this was one of the animatronics at the Jungle Cruise. The feathers are some of the same. The makeup and the paint is very, very similar, one to the other, done about a year apart. Here's more of the natives when they're attacking the submarine. That's where the submarine native things clash. When they get on there, and there's the dancing natives at the Jungle Cruise. Some of the shields they had are very, very similar. They didn't use the same ones from the film, but they made ones that look almost identical to it. A lot of the costumes and the masks and whatnot look very similar. But it was even more than that. If Walt Disney had had his way, it would have been even more. Do you guys remember this? Remember the scene with it's a little bright, but remember that's really hard to see, and I'm right here. Remember the gigantic squid? that came out and attacks the submarine, that big dramatic moment, spoiler alert, with the big dramatic moment with the giant squid, Walt Disney said, that squid's going in the ride. Put it in. And he's the boss, so tell Walt Disney no. Anyway, so like the squid has to go in there, and Harper Goff said the squid can't go in there. It's rubber and it has big motors that make noise and wires, and it's designed for a movie set. It's not designed to be outside. He told Walt, it'll last for a week, tops, before tentacles start breaking off and whatnot. But it took him a while before he convinced Walt, that's not going to go in there. Because Walt had been rather insistent that he wanted that in there to scare people in the boat when you come around. Because, you know, if you've ever been to a jungle, it's filled with squids, right? Am I right? Giant squids? Some of you have probably lost family members to those giant jungle squids. Don't want to bring up that horrible memory for you. I'm very sorry. But so here's the Jungle Cruise as we know it, as 1955 publicity photo there with the hippo attacking. This is what Walt would have had it look like with the squid attacking. That's what Walt wanted right there. Boom. And then you could say goodbye to the skipper as he's dragged to his watery grave for not cracking the right jokes. All right, and then remember this map I showed you earlier? Right, remember that the Herb Ryman map? There's the squid is in the map. I didn't know that. I was giving a talk. My friend goes, dude, you pointed, why do you talk about the squid? I go, what about it? He goes, you pointed right at it. I'm like, I did? And so he showed me a picture he took. He's like, you pointed right at the squid and didn't mention it. So I blew this picture up, and you can see, there it is right there. There's the squid. Did I get even closer? Oh, there it is, right there. See, there he is, looking all squiddy. That looks more like an octopus. But so the original, Walt's like, that's going in. I spent a lot of money on that squid. I'm not just going to use it for one day on a movie set. We're going to use it till it breaks. So it was designed to be in the Jungle Cruise in the very beginning. And I'm writing a book on it. I found that out about a year ago. My buddy pointed that out. Another picture of them building the Jungle Cruise. I like this picture of Walt. He had his hands on his hips because he's not happy. He'd only been doing live action movies for about 6 years, and he still wasn't used to the amount of money it cost. For animation, the money you spend there's the cells, the people are drawing it, right? The people are coloring it. That's what you're spending money on. For a film set, you build a set and then you knock it down when you're done, right? You build a flat with the doors and the windows, it's a fake house. This has to be designed to last for decades, and you have to pour lots of concrete. And his complaint was, you're spending half my money on concrete, no one's ever gonna see it, because it's just under the ground. And they're like, Walt, you have to build it this way. I showed this picture to my wife. She's getting ready to take her contractor's license. She's gonna take over her dad's company. I got a sugar, you're wondering, how can I afford to live like this? I have a sugar mama, that's the answer. She's taking over her dad's construction company in Newport Beach, so that's how I can afford to hang out and do art and write books about Jungle Cruise. But I show this to her, she's like, oh look, the scaffolding is up to code, and because she's studying. But he's upset that all the money's being wasted on all this concrete. I'm like, wow, Walt, it's 2019, it's still there. So good investment. You got to spend the money, right? You got to return on it. But he was a little worried that no one was going to be able to see anything by the time all of his money was gone. But he would ride around a lot and see the construction. Matter of fact, one story that's in the book I've never told before, so I'll tell you. Walt was there at Disneyland a lot when it was being built. And they were, at a construction site, there'll be the big water truck that will drive with the hoses, they'll spray the water. There was one of the guys doing that, but the guy that ran the truck, his name was Tiny, so I'm assuming he was a giant, because that's how humans come up with nicknames. He had a hose and he would occasionally flip it up and spray people as he was watering down the part of the Jungle Cruise. He was getting ready to do it when Walt came around the corner and he just tagged Walt Disney with the hose real fast. Walt wasn't happy, but he wasn't fired, so there's that. That's a nice thing to say. So that's about the story. So I have some stories, some pictures of the Jungle Cruise then, and then now to kind of show you how it's been built. And by the mid-90s, it was considered to have its own microclimate. The jungle has grown over it to the point that it has almost its own atmosphere. If you go to Disneyland, the Jungle Cruise in the summer will be a good 10 to 15 degrees cooler than anywhere else in the park. Tomorrowland is real hot because it's all giant metal buildings and white reflecting the sun. And that's why I wouldn't move anywhere else. Why work out there and sweat in polyester when I can wear cotton in the shade? So this is the famous backside of water there in 1955. Here's the way it looks last year. I took this photograph. It's grown in a lot. Just a bit? All right. That's the backside of water, the one joke we could never get rid of, even though we tried. Here's the story I wanted to show you earlier. Remember the orange trees? Remember that? They took some of them and they just chopped them off and stuck them in upside down so they looked like banyans, like the old, like in a swamp, right? Like, ooh, how magical, a distant swamp or an orange tree from Anaheim. Either way, just stuck upside down. But they did. They had real orange trees still dotting the landscape in the background. What I found out a couple years ago is as the park grew and as they had more money, they pulled all the orange trees out except for one. There's one that's still there. And I worked there for years, drove by it every day, had no clue that that was an orange tree that I was looking at. But there's one still there. Here's the Cambodian shrine built by ancient Cambodian Shriners, as the joke goes. These are, sorry, I think you can see oranges right there. But that's an orange tree, right? And you can see, you're not too far from the dock, because I believe that's the Dominguez palm in the back. So the entrance is right back there. But here's a more recent photo. This is a photo from the skipper's point of view. So this is not, I'll show it to you from like what your point of view might be. This is the Jungle Cruise skipper sees the jungle from the back. So you're looking towards the dock. Those people right there, that's the Indiana Jones line. So the boats are actually coming this, you can see a bit of the wake, right? So the boat's coming this way. So guests are never looking that way. But right here, can you see it? You can't. There's the mighty orange tree right there. I have a better photo, but I'm showing you the whole, it's where there's a tiger. You know where the Bengal tiger is? There's a giant scene with a tiger. If you look straight down at the water, that's where this tree is. Here's a close-up of it. It's a tree stump, and it's taken root. As they say in Jurassic Park, life finds a way. It just started growing, so that's a real, and my buddy in horticultural said, yeah, it shoots out orange blossoms, and we still got to go by and trim them, just like they did in the 1950s, because it'll start growing oranges. So it's still there. There's still one original orange tree left from the 1950s, which I did not know all the years I worked there and drove by it. And I think that's pretty cool. If you want to know how to see it, this is your perspective. This is the way guests see it. As you come into the Cambodian shrine, or as we used to say, Walt Disney's first attempt at the monorail. The monorail. Whew. Anyway, so this is where the tiger is up here, and it's right behind this rock right there is where the orange tree is. So as you're going up, and if you're in the boat, your direction, you look, there's the tiger, look right down at the water, and you will see that little orange tree still growing there for what, 60-something years now, which I think is pretty amazing. What else was I going to show you? Oh, some other photos. Here's aerial shots of the Jungle Cruise to show you how wide open it was. And that doesn't look like much of a jungle at all, right? This looks like an unmowed lawn is what it looks like. But they had already spent a good deal of money on it. You can see this is from there's the backside of water. The boat's right going underneath there. There's another shot of the backside of water right there of it. You can still see some of the orange trees. Some of those, they make them look like fake swamp trees right there, kind of still stuck in all around, trying to make it just enough to hide some stuff. So I thought now I would take some time to tell you some of my wild skipper stories. How does that sound? All right, these are stories from my two books, Skipper Stories and More Skipper Stories. I wrote one serious book for my Ph.D. on, it was on the popular topic of religion and politics. Oh, let's stop this and talk about religion and politics, shall we? Come on. Nobody ever wants to, including me. All right, so I wrote a book about a guy named Pat Robertson. Some of you know about Pat Robertson? Wow, if you want to buy my book, you can buy it for $1 on Amazon. That was 8 years of my life well spent on that book. Anyway. But it's for my PhD, and it's religion and politics, and no matter what your opinion, after studying it, you're still like, just no matter what. Where this, I'm like, Disneyland, who's mad at this? The villain, the worst person ever in the history of Disneyland was a guy that worked there in the late 90s, and all he tried to do was make Disneyland more profitable. That's the villain. That's the bad guy. I can live with that. I can live with that villain. That's not much. That's not like an Indiana Jones level villain, right? That's not Darth Vader, so you can handle that. So these were a lot more fun to work on. So that's why when people asked, why didn't you write more books on these topics about religion and politics? I'm like, because I don't want to just go crazy. So I wrote, this is a lot more fun and more interesting, and people like it, and it's a lot more fun to talk about, so no one's going to get upset. But these were a lot of fun. I got to interview skippers. I interviewed a guy that worked there on opening day, July 17th, 1955. I interviewed students of mine, one of them who's still here. He better graduate this year, at Cal State Fullerton. They were Jungle Cruise skippers, and they were and I would interview them in my office here. And so people from all walks of life who've gone on all different careers all around the country. So what was interesting is I'd tried to publish a few other books and gotten rejected, and this company approached me, hey, we want you to write a book, and what if you interview one skipper for each decade, and they can represent that decade? And I thought, that's a horrible idea. So I pitched him my idea, and my wife, in her wisdom, because she's much smarter than I am, she goes, so you're trying to get a book published, right? And I said, yes, ma'am. She goes, and your last 3 book proposals got rejected, right? I'm like, yes, ma'am. And she's like, this publishing company offers you a book and you turn it down and pitch them your own idea, right? I went, well, it doesn't sound so good when you say it. Because my idea was, who can you pick one person to represent a whole decade? I know skippers from every era that are hysterically funny. And there's even this one skipper who I didn't think she was particularly funny. I'm like, she's got to have at least one good story. I interviewed her for 3 hours. She was hysterical. She's just very quiet. So I interviewed all these skippers from all these different eras. I said, let me just talk to anybody that will talk to me and compile all of their stories into this one book. And there were a bunch of people that were nervous to be in the, I don't want Disney to, because Mickey will kill me or whatever. They were a little worried, and so they weren't in the first book, and I was disappointed. My wife goes, honey, if the first book goes well, there'll be a second, and they will all be in the second. And a month after the first book came out, my publisher called me at my house and said, hey, how quickly can you do a second one? I'm like, oh, it's selling okay. Better than the Pat Robertson book. Yes! And didn't require student loans to get this one either. And so it took me 2 years because I had to do a lot of the interviews. Then my sister, who I already talked to, ooh, the microphone just got louder. Hello? Attention? Because I went like this. My sister transcribed a lot of the interviews for me. So I'd do all these things and she would do the hard work of transcribing them into written words. But let me tell you some of the stories. But I thought I would explain to you, if you're not super familiar, why are skippers very different. That I had a manager tell me that she hated having people trained at Jungle Cruise. And I asked her why. She said, because once somebody's trained at Jungle Cruise, they are ruined for the rest of the park. They are just no good anywhere else. It just destroys them as a cast member. And I thought, all right, here's a story that explains why that is. Oh, look at this photograph. This is a publicity photo from 1995 of the Jungle Cruise when Indiana Jones was brand new. You can see there's the skipper. There's the people in line actually exiting the line. I like this photograph because every skipper knows he's pointing at nothing. There's just dirt and plants right there. It's just clearly for a photo op. So every skipper I show that to goes, that guy never worked at that park a day in his life. I'm like, I know, right? He isn't. So anyway, they're laughing. Oh, that is dirt. Anyway, this is the way it was. You come through the jungle to a clearing, and then suddenly there's the ride, and people are in line, and it's like you're in the middle of the jungle. It's exciting. That's the way it was designed. This is the way Disney changed it in 2004. They built a wall of plants to block you from, and why did they do that? Answer, because skippers love nothing more than to stop their boats and insult all of the people that are waiting in line. I worked there for 3.5 years. That was my favorite part of the ride. You'd see somebody like in a jersey with a number. You're like, oh, look, that one's been numbered and released back into the wild. And you would just point at random people and just say mean things, and they couldn't hear you. So they'd smile, and you're like, smile if you're dumb, and they'd just wave, and just, oh God. But they got so many complaints. So this explains to you what skippers are. It is the only place in any Disney park, anywhere on earth, where they had to build a wall to protect you from the skippers. Only place. Because they would not stop. Can I tell you about time I did a joke that went too far? That's almost all of my jokes. All right. a friend of mine read my book. He goes, I could tell which stories, because the first book has a lot of my stories in it, because my daughters always wanted to hear them. So I put them all in there. I'm like, how do you know the stories are mine? He goes, I can tell the ones that are yours because they start out with, I was sure I was going to get fired. I'm like, yeah. That's how a lot of them start. Anyway, so, my story. So this is back when it looked like this. Before, I'm the reason they put the wall up, I think. Indiana Jones would break down because it breaks down a lot because it's a very complicated ride. And when it does, everybody leaves. All these people who were smiling are now all angry, and now they're on your boat. And so it'll be like an hour or two where you're just super busy because everybody's there, but they're not here to ride your boat and hear your jokes. They're here to sit down in the shade waiting for this thing to open up, right? So I come around the corner, I'm almost where he is, and I'm doing set up, punchline, then laugh, right? So I do set up, punchline, and right as I'm waiting for the laugh to hit, right as I do that, they reopen the ride. So they drop the ropes, they start letting people back in. And so literally hundreds of people that were waiting right there all start running into the ride, and my whole boat sees it. So I go like this, set up, punchline. Instead of laugh, the whole boat looks and goes, oh. 45 people all just look at Indiana Jones and go, oh. And it'd been like an hour and a half, and I'd had it because it was the summer. I lost my temper. And so I'm usually coasting. I just stopped the boat. And without thinking, I thought, look at that line. Look at that line's getting longer and longer and longer. And you guys are sitting, oh, you guys, look how close you are to it too. Oh, you're so close. Oh, man. We're not going to get back to the dock for like 10, 15 minutes. That's going to be like a 45-minute wait by the time you guys get out. And they were just getting angrier and angrier. And then I had to stop because a boat came around the corner, almost hit me. I'm like, oh, I better go. And I thought, that was fun. We joked. And so I tell a joke and nobody laughs. And I turn around as I moved on. And I go, why aren't they laughing? I turn around and they're all, oh, the hate. Oh, you could just, it was like oozing like butter. You could put it on toast. It was just so much hate. And I realized, oh yeah, I just spent literally a minute stopped when the boat stopped as they watched people run into the ride as I just made fun of them. They didn't like me much after that, so I just went fast, and I do that a lot. Oh, this will be funny. 5 minutes later, oh, that was not funny. I should not have done that at all. So hence the wall of bamboo, because there were people that ran and complained that skippers were making fun of them, and our response was, well, yeah. Anyway, so that's the mystery of the bamboo wall, to protect you from the evil that is Jungle Cruise skippers. This is one of my favorite planks. You know, when you're out there at the jungle, there's the elephant. We call him the squirter. He comes up, he or she comes up and squirts water at the boat, and then it goes back down and you drive by it and it comes back up a second time. Oh no. But spoiler alert, it doesn't squirt you the second time. It's not a real elephant. I don't know if you guys, you figure that out, all right? Good. It's not, I'm sorry to tell you, I didn't mean to destroy the magic, but it's not a real elephant. But it would always come up. So during the lunch break, me and a buddy, my friend now works at the Disney studio, so I can't tell you Fred's name. It's not Greg. I don't know why I said Greg. But we were on lunch break. We're in there's a cave. There's an elephant called Bertha that's in the shower. That's a big cave behind her, and you can go in there, and we're in there eating lunch, and I go, there's a little hole you can peek out and see this elephant, and there's a reset button. And I go, let's play a prank. And it was a skipper. And I never told her that this was a skipper's first day on the job alone. She pulls up with a boat full of guests, and the squirter comes up, squirts water once, and when it goes back down, I hit the reset button. So it started the cycle all over again. So she drives by thinking it's coming up for the second time. The computer thinks, no, it's coming up for the first time. And it just sprays the whole boat with water. And one of the things we are trained as, you cannot get the guests wet. And she just tagged the whole boat, got sprayed with water. We laughed and laughed and laughed. Friends like, do it to everybody. I'm like, no. Then they'll think it's like its ride is broken or something. So we waited for her to come back a second time. And we tagged her boat a second time. Just soaked him. And we laughed and laughed. And meanwhile, we're both sitting in the pitch black dark, eating sandwiches, peeking out through a little hole, waiting for her. Like, that's just creepy. Anyway, so we hear her coming. Here she comes a third time, because it was late at night when there weren't that many boats running. And this time it's just her and a manager. And because her boat comes back all wet twice. My friend's like, do it again. I'm like, no, watch. And he pulls up and it does it like normal. And he goes, see, the elephant comes up twice. The first time it squirts, the second time it doesn't squirt. And she goes, it squirted both times. And he's like, it's not, there's a computer that operates it. It will not do that. It will never do it twice in a row. It did it twice in a row. And we were laughing so hard. I don't know, asked the manager years later, he's like, can you remember? He's like, that was you. I should have known that was you. That was you? I'm like, yeah, that was me. He goes, you couldn't hear us cackling and laughing. But there's another jungle noise. He had her practice. And I'm like, dude, let's wait and tag her again. And just for fun. But our lunch break was over and we had to get back. And then I realized we never told her. And then I thought, what if she bought my book? And she's like, hey. She's walking around telling people, they say it squirts once, it squirts twice. There's like a random computer glitch and it squirts twice. Nope. Jerkwad skipper's having fun at a rookie's expense. So that's a good story. I can tell you this story about a friend of mine named Ritt, the Vanishing skipper. Ritt was a guy that, he's in my second book. He did some pranks that were just amazing. I realized, the kind of guy you don't want to pull a prank on ever, because he will get you back and you will not be prepared for it. There was a joke, we called it lights out. You do it on a new skipper. Last boat of the night, all right, you go, last boat, last guests, and then when the boat comes back to the dock, all of the lights are shut off and everybody's gone. And because you've been trained, you know you can't pull up to the dock unless there's someone at the dock. It's a safety thing, right? Disney's very focused on safety, which is important, but you can't get close to the dock until somebody shows up. And all the lights are shut off and you just sit there, right? So they say, oh, let's get Ritt, he's new. So he pulls up, the boat pulls up, he sees there's no lights, and my friends who were there, I talked to like 5 people that were part of the prank and Ritt. They thought, we thought we got him and we're all hiding. And his boat pulls up and then it stops and then it backs up back into the jungle and disappears. She goes, and it's back there for a couple minutes. And when the boat pulls forward again, he's not on it. And the boat just comes drifting slowly up to the dock. I'm like, what did you do? He's like, we ran out from where we were hiding. We're like, grab the boat. And we unload all the passengers. And we're like, what happened? And some of the guests said, he said he quit and jumped on the island and said he's going to go live in the jungle. And he walked off to one of the islands. True story. And so they're like, so the manager's like, okay, don't tell any managers that he did this, but none of us can leave until we find him. So we got to get a boat. We're going to go back to this island and we're going to search it from one end to the other to find him. And we hope he doesn't like swim across the river or something. And while they're sitting there in the building talking about it, he walks up. And like, hey guys, what's going on? But he just like snuck into the circle of skippers and was there for a minute before they realized he was there. Like, what happened? There was a group of tourists in the front that had like rain slickers on, and one guy had a backpack and a baseball hat. It was a Japanese tour group, and Ritt is half Thai, half Anglo-white. And he goes, I just asked, hey, can I borrow your jacket and your backpack? And I put a hat on. And he sat right next to the throttle so he could run it in case if it was an emergency. He goes, I just sat there like the rest of them. He goes, you guys unloaded me like all the other guests. And the best part about it is that group of the Japanese tour group was there. They took a group photo with him in the outfit, and they're like all smiling. And he's like, here's the photo. Like, you did not. He's like, look, they took a photo of me with them. And in the back of the photo, you can see the group of skippers huddled like, we got to go on the island. We got to find this guy. So very quickly they realized, all right, don't mess with Ritt. He will burn you hard on that. And the manager she goes, I hadn't been in charge of Jungle Cruise that often. It was like my 4th or 5th time. She goes, I was trying not to cry. I was so stressed that he would just vanish on me like that. So, yay. See, they're not all me. Yay for Ritt, the Vanishing skipper. If you're thinking, that David Marley seems like a nice young man, here's a story where I'm not. Yet another story. If the Squirter story didn't do it for you, this is a tiki room story. I added this one because I did it at a talk I did about 2 months ago, and they liked it, so I thought I'd share it with you guys. I was a professor here, and every once in a while, I don't know why, I would just get uppity, I guess is the only word. I'd get it stick up my nose or whatever. But you had to say, welcome to Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room, brought to you by Dole Pineapple. And for some reason, I had a problem saying I'm like, I'm not here to work at a commercial. I'm not a commercial guy with my name tag, Disneyland and David and the whole. I don't know what I thought I was doing, but I'm like, I'm not going to say that they paying me. Dole I ain't saying nothing. And so I had trainees. When I had trainees, I'm like, listen, you have to say, brought to you by Dole Pineapple. I never did it, but I made my trainees say it. So yes, I'm a hypocrite. So one day, I had my trainees with me. A manager comes in. He goes, well, Dave, I heard you're not saying they're brought to you by Dole Pineapple. And I'm a bad person, but I'm also not going to lie to you. So I just went, yeah. He goes, I need you to say it. I need you to say brought to you by Dole Pineapple. And I went, okay, I will. I'll do it. But this guy knew me. He went, I need to watch you do it. Right in front of my trainees. I went, oh yeah, you want to watch me do it? All right. And so spoiler alert, you may or may not hit a button, and you may or may not have 30 seconds before the parrot that you're supposed to wake up magically wakes up, right? So I said, oh yeah, you want to watch me? All right. And I just kept eye contact with him, hit the button, I walked over, I said, welcome to Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room, brought to you by Dole Pineapple. That's right, Dole Pineapple, not Del Monte. That stuff from Del Monte will kill you dead. Let's wake up the parrot. And I walked up, and the people didn't notice anything was wrong, and I walked by him, and he goes, just do whatever you want. And he walked out the door. Yes! So every time I'm grocery shopping, my wife goes, should we get this? And it was Del Monte. And one of my daughters, my wife didn't know I told my daughters all these stories, but my daughter was 7. She goes, Del Monte will kill you dead. And I'm like, don't. That's just a joke I made up, not a vicious rumor. So, but it's cute when a 7-year-old says it. It's cute when they say almost anything, right? So, and then you wake up Jose. Anyway, here's another one of my favorite stories with a good friend of mine named Benny. I got my Ph.D. before he did. He teaches at Arizona State University now. He used to teach at Long Beach State, but he's also a doctor skipper, but I'm first, so he's Benny. Anyway, Benny worked there for a number of years at the park, and it was, you know grad nights? Did any of you go to Disneyland for a grad night? He was working a grad night. He was 17 and still in high school and was working a grad night, so with kids basically his own age, and he'd been working there for about 2 weeks. So he's working late, right? Grad nights where it's like from 11 o'clock at night till 6 in the morning, so it's late at night. So he drives by here, the scene called the Veldt, where there's the lions and the dead zebra and the whole animals, whatnot. He comes around the corner and he's talking, and as he's doing it, it's back when they had real Smith & Wesson, well, they still have them, the Smith & Wesson 38 revolvers, right? They have pins in them so they can't fire live ammo, but they shoot blanks. And they're very strict. When I got there, I thought, I'm going to fire a gun at this thing, I'm going to fire a gun here, I'm going to shoot like this. And they're like, you can only shoot at the hippos, and you can only do it twice, because they use the pistols to signal different things. Like if your engine breaks down, you fire it 3 times, and that's a signal to get help. If you fire it 4 times, it's a different. So I learned you only shoot it in the hippo pool, and you can't even shoot at the hippos because kids cry. So you shoot it in the air and go, oh, look, I got the hippo in the trees. And then I thought that's dumb until someone shoots it at a hippo. Ah, hippo's dead. You're like, oh, I shouldn't. I just ruined this kid's childhood. I should not. Anyway, so, right, very strict rules on gun use. So he comes around the corner here, and out behind this side of the rock comes a skipper, and he pulls out 2 of the pistols. And then another guy stands up through the cave. He whips out 2 pistols. And then on this side, around the rocks, a 3rd skipper comes out with pistols. They all point them, and all go, bam, 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 bam. What's 6 times 6? You figured out what the math is. But anyway, I told you no math. That was 2 weeks ago. So they fire all these shots, and I go, what did you do, Benny? And he goes, what do you think I did? I was 17. I screamed, I threw the microphone in the air and hit the ground. Because he was screaming and crying, and the boat was laughing, and he thought, all right, they got me. He goes, he reached up to move the throttle forward, and he goes, but when I get back to the dock, he goes, my manager is there, Disneyland security is there, and 2 armed members of the Anaheim PD are there. And he goes, he pulls up to the dock, and you can tell he was a skipper because his first thought is, oh God. All right, what's my story? And the manager was one of our allies. He was always good to us. And he leans over and goes, hey, Benny, These guys said they heard gunshots out there, that someone has a gun. I think it was fireworks. Don't you think it was fireworks? And then he leaned at me and winked, and then he winked, and I went, yes, they were fireworks. They were kids with fireworks. I saw, he goes, and as they're talking, so Benny's in the boat, the police and the security guard and the manager are like leaning in the boat talking to him. While they're doing that, the three skippers with the guns in their hands walk right behind them and put them in the little locker cabinet and close it and walk away. And Benny goes, so first I'm saying, no, it wasn't guns at all, as I'm watching the guns walk right behind the cops and get stuck in the cabinet. He goes, if all they did was walk over to the gun cabinet, open it up and see all the guns were gone, they would have known. But they didn't bother to look, thank God. They just thought they'd ask a skipper and hope they got the right answer. So I love that story. So the Anaheim PD never found out. Kids had firecrackers. Kids. Yeah. With their firecrackers. 36 firecrackers. All right. There are, if you want to follow, there's my Etsy store. You can follow me on Instagram if you have Instagram. Does our mom have Instagram? No, you Instagrammed for her. All right. My 2 books, I'll have them for sale out in the back for $20 each, or a deal, 2 for $40. How about that? Told you I'm not good at math. We got a lot of time. I could even tell you more stories, or I'd be happy to answer any questions you would have about Disneyland or Jungle Cruise or anything. Who has questions?
Did you meet your wife on a Jungle Cruise?
I did not. I met my wife on a school bus that she was riding and I was driving. Is that story true?
Yes, it is.
It's 100% true. All right, good. I know you're all creeped out now, huh? All right, good. But I did. She's only 7 years younger than me. It's not that creepy. And her mom was my boss. But no, matter of fact, all of my friends married other Disney people. So I'm like, I love you, but I can't marry you. And then she got hired to be a choreographer for Disneyland. So she did some parades and like puppet shows. She was in charge of special choreography. She called it when it's too weird. Like they had a costume, it's the carpet from Aladdin. So you're in basically this big mylar sack and you had to stand like this and be a carpet. And they didn't know, how do you dance like a carpet? So they brought my wife in and they're like, here, figure out how a carpet dances. And so she did it, and she did all the choreography for all the, so she did, and she would make in a day what it took me a week to make, working 40 hours at Jungle Cruise. I'm like, I'm in the wrong business. Takes forever. Yes, sir.
So how do they go about picking people to do this job? How worked do they want you to be?
That is the great, myth. I figured there was like an audition process. They really don't care. They just have, any day you go to apply at Disneyland, the HR people have a bunch of spots to fill. And if you show up on a Jungle Cruise day, you go to Jungle Cruise whether you're ready for it or not. And I trained a lot of people there, and some people didn't want to work there. And they're like, I don't want to talk in front of people. I'm like, I will get you transferred somewhere else. And I had a couple friends. I had a student here, graduated 2 years ago, fantastic student. She worked, she goes, I want to be a Jungle Cruise skipper. She goes, I hired into Disneyland and said, I want to be a skipper. They said, okay. And they sent her to California Adventure. They said, okay, in 6 months you can apply to move to Disneyland. So she applied and they moved her to Fantasyland. And she's like, I've been working for Disneyland for 2.5 years. How do I get to Jungle Cruise? Can you help me? I'm like, I know the head lead, let me ask him. So I messaged him and he answered me back I never looked so cool in my life. 5 minutes later, he messaged me back. He's like, yeah, have her come talk to me. We'll get her in the Jungle Cruise. I'm like, that never works out. That's like Hollywood movie. It never worked out that fast again. But it's very random. That's the one thing that's very bizarre, that I interviewed a guy that worked there in the 70s that almost quit because he didn't like speaking in front of people. And now he goes, it's what he does for a living. And he goes, the only reason, he was so shy, he was afraid to talk to people, but you do it for 8 hours. You know, every hour you'll have 6 or 7 boats. You better get over it. And each boat is different. Some may not speak English, some are different ages and ethnicities. So you get very good at looking at the crowd, thinking, okay, what are they gonna like? Are they younger, older, where are they from? But I was really surprised at that they don't really care. The reason why I got, both times I worked at Disney, I went straight to Jungle, was I met managers before I went to work there. I went to the park, I found a manager, I'm like, hey, I really want to be a skipper, can you help me be a skipper? And I would charm them. And then the second time I went, they go, there are no openings at OLLI-CSUF. I'm like, call this guy, he said there is. And he's like, there are no openings. He said to call him. And then he called him, he's like, all right, you're going to Jungle Cruise. But he seemed angry at me that I wasn't going to be in food service or wherever it was he wanted to send me. Because I tried to work there in the early 90s, right out of college, and they had nothing at, I'm like, I want jungle or nothing. They're like, sorry, nothing. So I got a job as a bus driver where I met my wife. So that's the interesting thing. One other thing I'll tell you is we had trainees that weren't very good at it, or some that were just not making it out. We would transfer them other places. I had to deal with one manager who's still there at the park. We would send people if they were really, sometimes you get a guy that's really bad and they don't want to follow the rules like we follow the rules. You knew they weren't going to be a good fit. They were like, I'm cool, whatever. I'm like, I'll do whatever. I'll shoot the gun wherever I play. You knew they weren't going to work out. We would give them the Toontown treatment. And Toontown is like the worst place to work because it's all strollers. I don't know if you know this, geographically it was built a mile from the sun. I don't know how that works out, but it's, if you jump, you can touch the sun. And so there was this guy that was obnoxious. And so I called, I go, hey, Mark, I got a guy for Toontown. He's like, okay, I'll be right down. And the manager comes down, that guy, I'm like, yeah, he goes, hey, and he goes, come here. He goes, we have this deal. He goes, you're outside, it's hot, it's wet and jungly. I got a great place for you. And you're gonna love it. It's a special thing that just came up at Toontown. Come on, I'll take you over there. And he turns around, he's like, bye, suckers. And he walked away. And I'm like, don't laugh. And so we're all there very quietly. So yeah, I assumed it was an audition thing, but it's not. But it's neat because it brings it out of people if they like it. So I saw a hand over here somewhere. Yes, sir.
What do you do about language barriers between you and your participants there?
Luckily, a lot of it's very visual. Like there's a lot of stuff to see. So if there's a lot of stuff to see, you can just point at it. The only problem is if they're speaking whatever language, if they're just screaming it all the time, then it's hard to talk over them. Yeah, my dad spent years going to Japan. He figured he spent about 4 years of his life in Japan. So he taught me a bunch of phrases that I would use when I had Japanese tour boats, that they were just stunned that this giant white boy knew. Now all I know is skoshi, which means a little. So, oh, you speak Japanese? How much? Skoshi. What else do you know? Benihana. That's all I know is that. Like, I've lost whatever knowledge of Japanese I had, I lost, but I knew a little bit just so I could say, like, I could say tiger and danger, and I could say things like that. One interesting thing is I found out, but you can usually point and people laugh, and they can get, a lot of the rhino chasing the guy at the pole, right? That's visual. But I found out something interesting. I was at lunch at the employee cafeteria, and a buddy of mine said that he had a boyfriend who was deaf, and deaf jokes don't translate well. That there's a scene with the gorillas and there's a Jeep. And the joke was, hey, they were trying to get that Jeep to start. Now it's turned over. Get it? Turned over. In sign language, it is, they were trying to get that Jeep to start and now it's upside down. And he goes, so the jokes don't work in sign language. And I went, I got to have sign language jokes. But then I came up with, I'm not a fan, if you are, God bless you. I'm not a huge fan of puns. I don't like puns. I know my brother-in-law lives to tell puns. So Jungle Cruise is filled with puns. And so I came up with the Pun Killer Tour. And really what it was is I would do a lot of the hearing impaired jokes. I would say, hey, look at that Jeep. They're trying to get to start. And now it is upside down. And like, in the elephant pool, it's like, feel free to take a picture. They've all got their trunks on. I'd say, here's a picture of the elephants. Feel free to take a picture. They're all dressed appropriately. And I would do all of the puns, but as literal as possible. So the few times I did it, I had friends in the back of the boat. So you had a boat with 40 people in it. They're just staring because I had 4 friends in the back that were laughing their heads off. They're dressed appropriately. Ah! So the boat would look at me and they'd look back at my friends and back at me. They're like, is he doing a joke we don't get? Like, they couldn't figure out, why is this funny? Which to me made it hysterical that I was doing all these puns, but as literally as humanly possible.
Is there a basic script that the skippers are supposed to use, but then they can improvise, or does everybody make up their own?
There's a script, and the original script up until like 1962 was pretty serious. They wanted it to be like a real adventure movie you were on. And so in the 60s, when they added the rhino and stuff, it got sillier and sillier. And it used to be every scene had like 2 or 3 options. Now it's like 5 or 6 options you can do. And it goes back and forth. Some years management's like, do whatever you want. And some years, like currently, management's like, if it's not written on the script, you can get fired for saying it. Where when I was there, the rule was, you can't get in trouble for saying anything once. Like there was a manager who was famous. He'd come over and he'd put his foot in your boat and he was like, that was funny. Don't ever say that again. You're like, okay. That was my one warning. So it goes, when I got hired as a trainer, I had to go to the interview and I thought, I'm a college professor. How are they not going to hire me as a trainer? The only thing I was worried about is I did one joke that was on the script. I did the backside of water because you had to. I didn't do a single joke that was, I'm like, what if they asked me about the script? I'm screwed. I don't. And so they didn't ask me anything about it. So I'd be training people and they'd be reading the script and I'd be reading it going, this is awful. So my last summer there, my wife was pregnant. I was finishing my Ph.D. I had a lot going on. I shouldn't have been spending my summer working at Disneyland. My wife's like, honey, you really got to quit. I'm like, yeah, I really got to quit. I don't want to quit. So I remember sitting in my car in the parking lot and I'm like, all right, God, I need a sign. Give me a sign that it's time to quit. Don't let me get like run over by a churro cart. Don't make me like angry and bitter, but give me a sign it's time to leave Disneyland because I do not want to leave Disneyland. And it's when they still had the paper schedules out. Now it's all on computer, but they had them on paper. And mine had the hours and it would say a J for jungle or a T for tiki. And I got there and it said SO and it was like 9 to 5, like a real job, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I'm like, there's my sign, I'm quitting. I don't know what SO is. Sucks, obviously. I don't know what it stands for. I'm not doing it. What a good employee I am, right? I'm not, you can tell that's why I'm a professor, because my only job is, oh, you think what? Out! And then that's my whole job. I'm not, so I walk into the manager, I'm like, what does SO stand for? Trying to maintain my calm, thinking this is my last day. I guess I'm leaving Jungle Cruise. And he's like, oh, I forgot to ask you, we want you to know if you want to be one of the group of people that helps write the new script this summer for the Jungle Cruise. So instead of being on the ride every day, you'll hang out with the Imagineers in Burbank and you'll be in an office here and you get paid $2 more an hour and you can wear your regular clothes and just write jokes all summer. Would you be interested? He actually goes, would you be interested in that? I'm like, I don't know why you bothered to say the extra $2 an hour. I would have done it for free. I'm like, so I called my wife, honey, guess what? God really wants me to stay at Disneyland all summer. So I quit like 2 weeks before my daughter was born. I'm like, all right, I got it. Because we finished, but we got to help write you want to hear my best joke? You want to hear it? All right. There's a scene, I don't have a picture of it, which makes it really awful, but there's a scene with the rhino, right? Chasing the guys up the pole, right? You know what? Yeah. And that beach is covered in rocks. The other beaches are kind of like sandy or whatever. This one's covered in rocks. So here's my best joke. Hey, look at those rocks. Man, that's a lot of rocks. Thank you. That was my best joke. That's my best joke. That's the reaction it got when I pitched it in the room. All the writers were like, no. And they just crossed. I'm like, no, that joke works. And I go, all right, we were getting ready to go to lunch. And I got uppity. I'm like, all right, during lunch, I'm going to go put a costume on. We're taking a trip. I'm going to do that joke. And I will show you that joke works. So we get on the boat. They're in the back. And they got their little clipboards. And I got guests on my boat. We come around the corner. I do that joke. The boat roars with laughter. The Imagineer with the clipboard goes, and then I check something. I go, all right. Because the joke is, it's a rhino, and there's hyenas that are barking, and the guys are yelling, and the rhino's like, brrr, and it's all this action that's up here, and you're going, look at those rocks! And so that's the joke, and that's why everybody laughs. And so the Imagineer goes, okay, that's on the script. And she goes, you know, you're encouraging people to ignore a $400,000 piece of audio animatronics, right? You're aware of that, right? And I said, a joke is a joke, I don't care. If it's funny, I'm gonna do the joke. And so whenever I go there and the skipper does that joke, I'm like, hey, that's my joke. But that's always the reaction it gets is always stunned silence. So like, that doesn't even have a punchline to it. And then we'll go back. Yes, sir?
Did you ever drive the boat intentionally off the rail? And if so, how did you explain your way out of it?
I never did. Were you a skipper?
No, my son.
Okay, because the whole talk you've been nodding your head. I'm like, all right, he knows more than all right. It's called derailing. The boats have a guide in the front and the back. And so it rides on a little metal pole. That's how my wife drives a boat through Newport. I'm like, I've spent more hours than you have driving a boat. She goes, first of all, no, you haven't. Second of all, your boat was on a rail. I'm like, well, I never hit anything, so take that. Never hit nothing. But a lot of skippers have. The rule was you couldn't get in trouble if your front came off, because usually that means you hit like a tree branch or something. And everyone says, and I would tell my trainees, when it happens, you'll know, because instead of the boat, so you feel, because you'll feel the wheels on the bottom of the river, you'll tell. You get in trouble if your back end floats off, because that means you stop. You know boats have a wake? If you stop your boat too fast, that wake will come and lift your boat right off. My favorite story was there was one boat they were experimenting on and they took the governor off of so it could move. Up until the 1980s, they didn't have governors on them, so you could really move them. But they were testing something and they took a governor off, and my friend Benny had been working on this boat. And at the end of his shift, his boat switch came and he goes, hey, be careful with this boat. It doesn't have the governor on it, so it's really fast. You can derail and crash if you're not careful. She's like, okay. And again, remember the guns and the rules? With Jungle Cruise, you had mics and very specific things you had to say, like almost like combat radios, like you call in this code and that, very serious. They teach you how to talk, right? So they leave, and he goes, she takes off on her first trip. He goes, I'm just sitting there talking, and then you hear 6 shots, meaning a derail. And you're like, oh, something happened. And so you turn on the radio, and all you hear is, jungle people, I'm on land. So, they said, where are you? I'm on land. So she popped the front guide and the nose kind of hit the shore. It slid back off, but jungle people, I'm on land. So they just drove around to find her where she was. They're like, not only did you not listen, you broke every radio communication rule there possibly was. There was a guy that did a tour pretending like it was all tape recorded. He'd be like, hi, how's it going? Good to see you guys. All right, well, you guys ready to go? Let's go on the Jungle Cruise. And he'd turn around and he would make the tape recorder noise. He'd go, welcome aboard the world famous Jungle Cruise. And he would do this completely different voice. It's like, you will see many beautiful animals around the world. You go, you guys having fun? It's all good? All right, good. Look to the left. But it was all him. And another skipper of mine would get there. He's like, it's my first day. I'm a little nervous. I got my note cards. And he would take them and then he would drop them. And he'd pick them up. And so you'd be going by like the rhino. He'd be like, there is the hippo. And he read it. And the cards were blank, but he would be pretending and he would do the whole boat trip wrong. And to see him do it, because his hands would shake and his voice would crack and he'd go, like he was just trying to get through it. And the whole boat was like, you got this, buddy. We're like, dude, it's the 8th time he's done that today.
Does management have a way of listening where they can monitor the skippers and what they're saying?
They used to send their relatives on the boat to watch you. Now they have a guest that would, they were there to video camera the ride, but they kept pointing it at the skipper. That's how you knew. Now that everybody has a phone out that can watch you, if you do a joke, it's on the internet immediately. So, and managers are like, oh, we're hiding the bushes and watch you. But we all know where managers can hide. And I've been on boats where even at night, we were like, and there's a manager. And you have the headlight, and you go, boom! And we would do it when we would guess they were out there. We're like, we think they're out there. And then boom, and they stand up, Gary, then they'd stand up. Sometimes you would do it and they weren't there. You're like, all right, but they've got skippers convinced they know more about what's going on than they really do. Yeah, they told me that no one goes out in the jungle without us knowing about it. I said, oh, I guarantee you, I can be out to the one rock, I'll wave at boats and get back before you know I'm gone. And they dared me to it. And I said, okay, I told this one skipper, watch me, I'll be on the walk, I'll wave at you. And I went there, waved at him, made it back. I'm like, I can go out in the jungle. So yeah, management gets very worried, which is interesting because I met with some people at the Disney studios. They want the skippers to be free and have this freedom. And the manager's attitude is like, no, we all we hear is complaints if you do. So we don't want you to go off track. So that's one of the official photos that tells you you're a skipper if you've ridden the Rhino. I showed that at a Disney history conference. They're like, you're not allowed to do that. I'm like, that's why we took a photo. And here's the rocks. Look at those rocks. Man, that is a lot of rocks. Oh, we'll end it on that. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you. That's how we end it.